thought I got dropped in a cup for me. You're going to kiss. You're going to love. You're going to play. I wish we had a camera in the nursery so you could see the faces that Jenny's about to make. Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's got something to say. All right. How many of y'all have ever been, well, I know that you've literally never been there. How many of you have ever felt like you were in a hole by yourself? Right. I mean, there's two parts to that. One is being in a hole, one that you can't get out of. Another one is by yourself. Right? If you have ever felt like you were in a hole all alone, there's no getting out of it, then God's got a word for you tonight. All right? So we'll just title the sermon, Alone in a Hole. Now, in Genesis chapter 37, we'll find the majority of our scripture tonight. We're going to talk about Joseph. Joseph is a character that most folks are familiar with. If you're not that familiar with him and what all he went through, he was the youngest son of Jacob. He was 17 years old when this happened. This is out of Genesis 37, verse number 2. And he was 17 years old, had 11 older brothers. He was a baby. He was a favorite. He was arrogant and cocky. He was a little bit full of himself because of the love and attention that Daddy showed him. Daddy gave him a coat, a real fancy coat. Dolly Parton sang a song about it back in the 70s. It was, some people got that. It was a different coat she was singing about, but it was still a coat. It was real fancy. His brothers were madly jealous of him. And he didn't mind, at this time, being a young teenager, kind of rubbing it in their face. And he had a dream, actually a couple of dreams, and he shared it with them. This is the account of the dream. Now, it says here, verse number 2, Joseph, young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah, and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about him. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. And then Joseph had a dream. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had." Now imagine your younger sibling is coming up to you telling you this. All right? Listen to this dream that I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, gathering up the sheaves, the cut down wheat and stuff. We were binding it up when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright by itself. Your sheaves, they gathered all around mine and it bowed down to it. So my bundle of hay stood up by itself. And then all your bundles of hay came and bowed to my bundle of hay. That's not going to win over them brothers. That's basically insinuating, hey, this dream I had means that you are going to worship me, your little brother. So his brother said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream of what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. He said, "Listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon," from my mom and dad, "the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." So not only were y'all bowing down to me, but Mom and Daddy was bowing down to me also. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? What kind of dream is it? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in his mind. Down in verse number 12, his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. So his daddy said, come, I'm going to send you to them. I'm going to send you down there to work with your brothers. He said, very well. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. I want you to go and take names. And if they ain't doing something right, I want you to come tell it. That's the kind of man Joseph was becoming. That was how his daddy treated him. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, he said, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flock? He said, they moved on from here. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. Down around Troy. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. They said, here comes that dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him. And throw him into one of those cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes about his dream. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. He said, let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Just throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness. But don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate one, the token of the covenant. And they took him and threw him in the cistern. The cistern was empty, come like a well. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Instead, let's sell him to these Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And then all the brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, the brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites. And they took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He was pretty upset. He thought that they killed him and done away with him. When he went back to his brothers, he said, the boy's not there. Where can I turn now? Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood, and they took that robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see if it's your son's robe. They knew who it was, and he knew who it was. He said, it's my son's robe. Some ferocious animals devoured it. Joseph had surely been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes. He put on sackcloth, and he mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. He said, no, I will not continue. I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. Now, that's the story of how Joseph got separated from his family. You can preach about this, but 100 different ways. You can preach against arrogance, or trying to act like you're more than you really are, and sooner or later catch up to you. It was Joseph. You can talk about being a good sibling and not want to kill the other one. That's a sermon you can take out of this. But tonight we're going to talk about what it must have been like being down in that well by yourself. Joseph, at that time, I'm sure, reflected on what had happened and how he arrived there, why his brothers hated him so much, and why they would do that to him. You don't find yourself in a situation all alone without doing some serious thinking about how did I get here. All right? Now, the story of Joseph, the explanation is very simple. He drove his brothers angry. He made his brothers jealous. He wasn't innocent in it. Okay? He didn't just, they wasn't just mistreating him or bullying him. They had had enough of him. A lot of times when we find ourselves at the bottom and alone, it's because of something that we have done. And when we do things that don't measure up, and they're not what we're supposed to be doing, you're going to wind up alone. You're going to wind up feeling empty. And you're also going to feel like there's no way out. And when you get that feeling, sometimes the only thing you can do during that time is to look up, try to find some light, and try to find some hope. I want you to understand, Joseph was taken off to Egypt. And even though, y'all remember I quoted Max Lucado the other day, he said, in God's hands, intended evil was eventually good. Even though what they did was evil, they shouldn't have done what they did. Even though he egged them on and kind of caused it himself, they still shouldn't have done what they did. But in God's hand, the plan always seems to work out for good. Joseph did not have a Bible when he was in that holding room. He didn't have the New Testament. Actually, it was thousands of years from being written. He didn't have access to verses like Romans 8:28. When God works all things together for good, that includes being alone in a hole, feeling like there's no way out. That is something that God can work together for your good. God has given you freedom. You can do whatever you want to do. You can. But you've got to be willing to pay the price for it. Sometimes that price is hard. That price is steep. It may even cost you your life. But God will let you do what you want to do if you're willing to pay for it. Now, if you're ready to start following God in God's way, well then, every debt that you owe to God because of the sin in your life, you can accept the payment that's already been paid for that, thanks to the blood of Jesus Christ. And if you will take the blood of Jesus Christ and apply that payment to your past and all of your mistakes, He will lift you out of loneliness, out of a hopeless hole, and set you back on land of purpose. But you've got to turn to Him first. That's the way it works. See, in Romans 8:28, we're taught that all things, the good and the bad, work together for good. So that should give you a certain amount of hope. But the caveat to this is the rest of the verse. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. God has called each and every one of us to be His children. He's called each and every one of us to be His representatives, to be His ministers, to be His preachers, His teachers. That's what He's called all of us to do. That's our purpose. He's even gifted you with something spiritually for you to use in that ministry. If you don't know what it is, do a spiritual gift test and find out what it is. If you don't have one, then you're not saved. That's step one, salvation. But once you are saved, if you know you're saved, then God has gifted you for ministry, and that's what you should be doing. All these things in your past, God has allowed it. But He might have allowed it so that you could be who you are today. It took me a while to come to grips with that. Because I had regrets and I felt like I wasted years. At least 10 years of my life was wasted that I could have been in service to the Lord, but instead I was off doing what God allowed me to do. God was allowing me to learn. And I learned some lessons. And it would be great had I been taught those lessons earlier instead of having to learn them on my own. That would have been great. It would have been great. But instead, I didn't receive the encouragement. I didn't read the Bible. I wasn't knowledgeable in God's will and God's word. So it took a while longer. And come to find out, God even took all of those things and worked them together for good. See, in God's hands, evil, in God's hands, evil will eventually become good. How many of you ever felt lonely? You ain't raise your hand. I don't want you to feel lonely, raise your hand. Right? You might be the only one. Everyone has felt lonely. Everyone has felt at rock bottom. And they feel like they can't escape it. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brother, by his family. The rest of the story is that he goes to Egypt. While he's in Egypt, he has a pretty good understanding of dreams and things like that. He's a very smart guy, very good-looking guy. He catches the Pharaoh's eye, and Pharaoh is very impressed with it. Joseph said, a famine is coming, and to prepare for a famine, what we need to do is build these storehouses and start putting some grain up so that we will survive the famine. Pharaoh said, that's pretty wise. So he does that. And lo and behold, the famine hits. And for 7 years, they had enough to eat. Potiphar, his wife, come up to Joseph one night. You're doing pretty good here, Joseph. I'm a nice looking woman, you're a nice looking young man. Why don't we go have a drink? Or whatever they said back then. Hey, you want to go milk a camel? Whatever the pickup line was, that's what she used. And Joseph, being the man of God that he was, because something changed when he was down in that well. He turned her down. She got mad. She said, I get what I want. And if I can't have what I want, you're going to pay for it. She went tight. Made up some accusation. Anybody know what happened to her? What's the end of the story? Yep. You know what the Bible says, you reap what you sow? Yeah, it applies to everybody. And her situation didn't work out the way she had planned. But Joseph did because he stuck to God. Lo and behold, people started coming from out of town because the famine was in the whole land. Y'all remember that first dream he had? It's coming true. His brothers come over to Egypt to try to find some sustenance. And he winds up meeting his brother. They go back, get his dad. He comes, and he gets to meet his dad. Family reunion takes place. There's a lot that goes on in the family. But had he never been put in that hole, listen now, had he never been put in that hole, he never would have been able to save his family. There are things that we're going to have to do, that we're going to have to endure, that we're going to have to go through. But if we trust in God, our lives are in His hand, He's going to turn them out for good. I don't believe that God lets bad things happen for no reason. I believe every time there's something bad that takes place, there's something good that God can bring out of it. If you close yourself off to God, if your faith is not in God, if you blame God for whatever it is that you're going through during that time, you will miss it 100% of the time. But when something bad happens, why do you think Paul said we should rejoice in our suffering? Because Paul knew and he understood that whenever something bad happened, God was fixing to get some glory out of it. He understood it. He knew it. He had lived long enough to see it happen over and over and over again. Y'all, once could be a coincidence. Maybe twice a coincidence. 3 times, okay, things are getting a little bit weird. But after the 100th time of God being faithful, when are we going to start believing that God's just faithful? Something bad happened. Something good is fixing to happen. It always works out that way. When you're in God's hands. You can jump out of His hand for a minute. That happens sometimes. You know how to do that? You're walking with the Lord, everything is good, you're enthusiastic, and everything is as it should be. You know you're smack dab in the middle of God's will, and then you have that momentary lapse of reason, and because God will allow you to still lose your mind from time to time. And, boy, there's some pretty sin sitting over here. You know what I ought to do? I ought to go and dabble in that sin a little bit. You know, just a little bit, not too bad. Ain't gonna hurt nobody. Just a little dabble. I kind of like that. But I'm going to get back. Okay, I'm still good, right? That's going to work out for good, ain't it? Yeah. Yeah, probably. Full time. Don't worry, that for good. Who knows? They might swell up, wind up, we go to the ball game Friday night, so I sit on the front row, and then somebody pukes on the place where we would normally sit, and I just totally miss it, because God's looking out for me.
Yeah. But then that means Michelle.
It's probably Michelle's baby.
Yeah.
But she will. Just long every now and then.
She will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She'll be smiling at me.
Here comes the car.
Faith is very hard. A good level of faith is very hard to maintain. A joyful faith through the hard time is not impossible. But y'all, it is becoming rare to see in Christian life nowadays. Our world has become negative. And I think church folks are, it's almost as if, you know what, you're doing so good, we're about tired of hearing about you doing good. We're just going to chunk you in the well instead of us straightening up. I see that a lot. Now, can we all get to that level of faith that God wants us to do that? Joseph went through all of this stuff without ever having read Romans chapter 8. He never read the words, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." He didn't know who Christ Jesus was. He didn't know about the grace of God.
give us hope. But something happened in that hole. When he was down in that hole, something, for the rest of his life, he served God. And he tried his best. And he did that with simple faith. A very simple faith. Not trying to convolute it or weigh it down with legalism or anything like that, but a simple faith. It's trusting in God. When bad things happen, you trust Him. When the good times come, God, I pray for you. And for the rest of your life, just live it out like Paul. We go to the church in Thessalonians, chapter 5. He told them to pray without ceasing. Be joyful always. And if you are praying without ceasing, you are talking to God and trusting God and believing in God and doing what God wants you to do. The result of that is that you will be joyful always. Do you think this book is full of stuff that is impossible to do? Or full of suggestions? These are commandments, basically. These are things that we're told to do. Pray without ceasing and being joyful always are very hard things to do. Are they impossible? You just got to change your point of view. Change your outlook. And God is so good. And He's going to work out things to your good. But God is so good that He knows the way to get you to be joyful always and get you to pray continually might be just to put you alone in a hole. God may allow something like this to take place in your life because He knows there's no other way to get you there. He loves you that much. God's willing to do whatever it takes to get your attention. He deserves your praise. He deserves your faith. We could just give it to Him. Or we can learn lessons from all of them. I believe that my God is very loving and He's willing to do whatever it takes. If you don't choose to go with God's plan, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to wind up alone in a hole? Because that may be what it takes to get you where you need to be. And do you have the hope that if you wind up alone in a hole, that it's going to be all right? Do you have that hope? Because if we read the story about Joseph, it will be all right. Things can happen and turn around for good. I thank Jesus for that hope that we have. I thank God for the many opportunities that He's given us. Thank Him for His mercy and His favor, because we do not deserve a second chance, much less 1,000th chance. And over and over again, God is patient, He's long-suffering, and He puts up with it. I have no idea why. But He does. He loves it. He just blows my mind. I would have been getting floored by now. But I'm not God. Every moment now. I'm turning to Jesus. All right, that's enough. So we can church. Give me a minute.